Okay, so there's one more place we can go, still managing to preserve the go back 7 times to 2010 Tebeth 21, the late 2NC Pentecost of 1 Kings 18, and going to the next Baalian or Asheraian or Divine Pentecost after that. And it comes from oh God, I've tried so many interpretations of 2 Kings 1. Let's start with Esther 3 and Esther 9, it's easier. In Esther 3, verse 7, Haman is trying to find a way to kill and annihilate and destroy all the Jews. Why it doesn't say kill them, I don't know, but it's kill, annihilate and destroy all the Jews. He's not satisfied with killing Mordecai, he wants to kill them all, which is the guy in the Watchtower wanting to get rid of everybody who believes Lord's Witness understandings are correct. And he gets lots cast. It says someone cast lots, and they were cast from day to day and from month to month. And the lots fell on the 13th day of the 12th month. Now lot means, for instance, from a root word meaning to break, because you break the lot to get the one that's smaller than the others, and that's the one that's chosen, the broken lot. So Adar is a break and the 13th is a break. Now Adar's the break in the years when the new secular year begins. It breaks the Zoa year due to Jesus becoming Caesar in Adar. And on the 13th day there's another break. And we find out what that is in Esther 9 verse 1, where it says that on the day that Haman was going to kill all the Jews and annihilate and destroy them, there was a turning to the contrary, and rather than Haman's mob dominating the Jews dominated over all their enemies. So there's a turn around, and there is a reverse of dominating. There's a victory for the Jews, and they end up killing on that day 75,000 of their enemies in the jurisdictional districts and 500 in the palace district. And that is the break of the stranglehold of the control freaks in the Watchtower over God's people. It's the break up of the Watchtower. It's the break of the Watchtower, not the break up of the year, but the break of the Watchtower. That happens on the 13th day of Adar, which isn't the 13th literal day, it's the 13th festival day, which is Adar 23. Alright, so it's not the 13th of Adar, the 13th literal day of Adar, it's the 13th festival day of Adar, which is Adar 1, 2 and 9 are Sabbaths, 14 is the Passover, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 is the 2NC Assembly, 23 is the weekly Sabbath. So the 13th day is Adar the 23rd. You have to include the weekly Sabbaths as well, otherwise you don't get to the 15th of Adar. If you only include the annual festivals, you don't get 15 annual festivals in Adar. So you must include all festival days, including monthly and weekly. And if you do that, then the 13th day of the month is Adar 23. But Adar 23 is now the day we have for the second and the third fast times. It is the last possible day for fulfillment of 1 Kings 18, well, which is possible, given that going back 7 times ends on 2010 Tebeth 21. And the reason we didn't have this conclusion before, and we've now reached it, is the wording of 2 Kings 1, the ambiguous wording. Because when the chief of the first 50 and the first 50 was sent, Elijah said to the chief, he said to him, "If I'm a man of the true God, let fire come from the heavens and eat up you, thee and thy 50. But in the case of the second 50, which is said to be not a following 50, but a following chief of 50, which we worked out in the previous talk, meant that it was the weekly Sabbath at the end of the 50 count rather than at the beginning of the 50 count, which would have been the leading chief. So the 0th Sabbath is the leading chief, and the 8th Sabbath, or the trailing Sabbath, or the following Sabbath, is the following chief. And the following chief of a Pentecost is the leading chief of the next Pentecost. It's just the interposing Sabbath between the two 50 counts. So we know what the following means, but what it says in the case of the second 50 is that Elijah said to them, "If I am a man of the true God, let fire of God come from the heavens and eat up thee and thy 50. And I thought that meant that the chief of the 50 was an inclusive chief, so that he was a part of the 50, so that he would eat up the inclusive chief and the 50. The trouble is, by saying thy 50, thee and thy 50, he's speaking to a chief, he's not speaking to the 50. And since he's speaking to a plural of people, and since he's speaking to a chief, there must be 2 chiefs. so there must be 2 Pentecosts, and that's where we are now. We understand that there are 2, both the 77th weekly Sabbath counted 2 witness Asheraian and the 84th weekly Sabbath counted Baalian Pentecost, both take you to Adar 17, 2017, and the chief of that, the 8th Sabbath of that count, the next weekly Sabbath after the Pentecost, in both cases is 2017 Adar 23. So that day is a double chief. It's the chief of the 77th Asheraian Pentecost weekly Sabbath counted 2 witness version from 2006 Adar 28, our second no-show prediction for a warning bomb at a location we didn't know. And it's also the chief of the 84th weekly Sabbath counted Baalian Pentecost from 2005 ER 14, the fall of the Watchtower. It's a true church. So because it's a double chief, that's why he spoke to them. That's our new understanding. And with that understanding, it's a better understanding, because grammatically, when he spoke to thee and thy 50, he's obviously speaking to the chief. He's not speaking to the 50. Otherwise he would have said thee and you 50, or and you lot of 50. He didn't. He said thee and thy 50. So he's speaking to a chief, and yet he's speaking in the plural. So he must have been speaking to 2 chiefs. That's something I've read. I must have read that scripture I don't know how many times over the years. I never saw it before, but that's the way scriptures are written. They seem perfectly sensible until you analyse them, and then you ask, why on earth is it written like that? Unless you get to the point of asking that question, you will never understand the scripture, because they're not written sensibly. They're written with kinks all over them, and those kinks contain all the vital information. And your job is to iron out the kinks to make a level. Oh, who are you, O mountain? Become a level land. Not only of religious administrations and secular administrations, but also scriptures. For that reason, we're now going for both fire signs on the Sabbath of Adar 23, which is Friday, Saturday, March 16, 17. We're now Friday, March 16, so it's from sunset tonight to sunset Saturday night. Now, what I don't fully understand is in Esther 9 and Esther 3, Haman is all ready to kill and annihilate and destroy all the Jews if this thing doesn't happen. So it's almost as if he knows that if it doesn't happen this weekend, we're screwed. And certainly it looks that way to me. I can't see a way out of it. But I've been in this situation lots of times before, and God has always shown me a way out, and there has been a way out. Presumably when you get it right, there isn't a way out, because there doesn't need to be, and you're literally at the Red Sea and it's got to part, and there's nowhere else to go. And I've thought we were in that position, and I've been wrong on every occasion I've thought it. But this time, difficult to see how to move it beyond this weekend. Because you can't say that the chief of 50 is the first day of the next 50 count. Because the chief of 50 has to be to do with the 50 count that he's the chief of, because God isn't a hypocrite. He doesn't have the chief of a church, not in the church. That's what man does, it's not what God does. Man has the chief of the doctors, somebody who can't cure the sick, but God doesn't do that. The chief of the church is an elder in the church who's been in the church a while. So likewise, the chief of the 50 count has to be a part of the 50 count. He can be the leading Sabbath or the trailing Sabbath, but he can't be part of another 50 count. You don't get an elder in the Mormons running a congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses whilst he's still an elder in the Mormons. That isn't how God operates. So we have no choice but to limit the chief of the 50 to be, the furthest we can push him is the 8th Sabbath of the 77th Asheraian and the 84th Baalian Pentecosts. And that is this Sabbath that we're about to experience at sunset. So we now predict a UK nuclear terrorist attack producing a mushroom cloud rising above the Thames around about Dartford, and a nuclear terrorist attack on Manhattan producing a mushroom cloud rising above the Hudson somewhere around George Washington Bridge. Or, I mean, you have to draw a line from High Point, New Jersey to the nearest sea, which is round about the Hudson, I think just above the George Washington Bridge. And if you draw also a line from the highest point in Kent, the Garden of England, rather than the Garden State of the US. Ide Hill, the nearest seawater to there is around about Dartford. So that's why we've said it's these 2 locations. And we expect nuclear attacks round about those locations, Hebrew tomorrow, between sunset Friday the 16th and sunset Saturday the 17th. And those will be the 2nd and 3rd fire signs of 2 Kings 1, and they're both occurring at the chief of either the 77th 2 witness weekly Sabbath counted Asheraian Pentecost from 2006, ER28, or the 84th Weekly Sabbath Counted Baalian Pentecost from 2005, ER14. Thanks very much.